Hi everyone, and welcome to new episode, which is episode 2, hardware, and first part, which is about ports. As you remember, in the previous video we talked about input and output devices and how we have to connect them to our computer in order to be able to use them. So for connecting them to the computer, we need to have a point, and that point most of the time is computer ports. Computer ports are mostly behind the computer. Some of the ports could be at the front of the computer as well. And if you're using a laptop, they're mostly on the side of your computer, on the side of your laptops, or at the front of your laptop. Before we begin to talk about the different types of ports and what they do and what they support, we need to know two types of ports. And this is only for digital ports that transfer the data in the form of zeros and ones. There are two types of digital ports. One of them is serial, which is this one. And serial means that they just have one line of data and they are transferring each bit at a time, just one bit at a time, and all of the bits are on the line behind each other and they are going to the receiver one by one. So that means they are traveling in series. So this is the serial port. This is our ports. The ports which are serials are going to be in this format. So if they have just one line of data, that means they are serial port. And we have another type of ports which are parallel ports. Parallel ports means they have multiple lines of data and each one of them can transfer one bit of data at a time. Normally there are 8 lines of transfer in parallel transfer, and so that means we are transferring 8 bits at a time. So that means at each time we are transferring 1 byte, because every 8 bit is going to be 1 byte. Parallel is the use of parallel ports is a little bit limited, so there are not as many as the serial port, and the most famous one is the USB that we are using, universal serial ports, but the parallel ports are not as famous and they're not as widely used. There are a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that they have to have big ports because their ports have to have pins for each one of these lines of data. So that means they have to have a big port to be able to support all of these lines of data, which are at least 8 almost. And that's one of the reasons. Another reason is they are complicated and they can't transfer data over a long distance, because if they are transferring data over a long distance, there might be a chance of crosstalk. So that means the information that is at the receiver might not be the correct information. So those are the reasons that they are a little bit more limited than the serial one that we are using. Now that we understand about these two types of ports, let's talk about the actual ports that are on the computer. So the first port that we are going to talk about here is PS2. PS2 ports are the ports to connect mouse and keyboard to the computer. Today, most of the keyboards, if you notice, most of the keyboards and mouses are connected with the USB, so you don't really need to, if you're not using your computer for any certain reasons, you don't really need to have PS2 on your computer. You can just use the USB. And as you can see, PS2 is serial port because we just have one line of data and the rest of it. It's true that we have 6 pins, but we just have one of the pins is for the data. So that means PS2 is a serial port. So now let's see what are the reasons that some people rather use PS2 instead of using USB for connecting their keyboards and mouse. One of the reasons, which is not very common today, it is very limited. You might have a older version of computer, a very old version of computer, so your computer wouldn't support USB, so you kind of need to use the PS2 ports. And if you want to buy the keyboard or mouse, you have to make sure that it has the PS2 ports. But there are some other reasons that people still use PS2 instead of using USB. One of the reasons is security. If the information that you have on the computer is very important and you don't want it to be able to transfer in any ways, one of the ways that you can eliminate that is to not have any USB ports on your computer, so you will only use PS2, and that's a very rare occasions as well. But another widely reason that why people use PS2 instead of using a USB is for gamers, because PS2 is specialized for keyboard and for mouse. So one of the reasons that seem to be accurate is that the speed with the PS2 is higher than the speed with the USB, and the reason is a PS2 uses interrupt, so it means that it doesn't wait for its turn, for then CPU asks it that where it is, so it will tell the location and the status of it, so it can just interrupt and send the information right away. But for the USBs have to be prompted, so that means they're going to be a little bit slower, which normally you cannot feel it. It's not something, if you're doing your everyday tasks, you might not be able to feel it. I mean, you won't be able to feel it because it is very small. But if you're doing something like a game, I'm sorry, if you're using games and you need to turn around fast, you need to shoot, and seconds matter, milliseconds matter, then probably you want to use PS2 instead of using USB. So then we're going to talk about our next port, which is DB25. DB25 seemed to be first to be a serial port with lots of these pins not to be useful at all, but then later on they started using this port as a parallel port, because as you can see we have 8 line of information. This is from 0 to 7, and this is data out, so it had 8 line of information going out, so this means that this is actually a parallel port. And this port DB25 is used for printers today, for connecting the printers and some type of printers, and this is mostly on IBM type of computers, but it is used on other type of computers as well. And the 25, number 25 stands for the number of the pins that it has, and it is not as widely used. It is one of the old versions, because even today most of the printers you can just connect them with different type of USB, so this is not widely used either. And then after that we're going to introduce one of our analog type of ports, which is called audio port, or 3.5 millimeter TRS connections. They have to be color coded, but not all of the computers obey this color code, and plus today, if you notice, most of the computers just have one in and out for your mic and for your microphone, and the other one for your headset or things like that, so they're not as widely used. And I mean the 6 one of them, and it is not only on the computers, you can see them on TVs, and you might just have one for your as an audio jack or audio port on your cell phones as well. And then the other one we want to talk about here is DE15 VGA. DE15, they have 3 rows of pins and 15 pins in total. VGA is an analog port as well, so that means we can't classify it as a parallel or serial. It is only analog, and as you can see, for example, these pins are transferring red, green, and blue color, so they're actually transferring the actual signals, not the they're actually sending the signals and not the bits like the digital one. So VGA have a very low resolution, as you can tell, and it is a very old port, so it is on old computers. You can still see on some of the computers the VGA ports, but they are very old and the resolution of it is low, so they're not used as widely anymore. And the other one, which is a bit better than VGA, is DVI. Sorry. And then DVI have a few different forms as well. The resolution is better, way better than VGA. So there are three types of it. The three common type of them are DVI digital, which is DVI-D, and then you have DVI analog, which is DVI-A, and then you have DVI integrated, which is DVI-I, and it supports both analog and digital, so it is more convenient to use DVI-I to be able to support both of them. But then this is not as widely used as well, because another port not replaced, I mean there are still some VGA and some DVI exist, but HDMI is the best of all of them. There are a couple of reasons why HDMI is way better than DVI and VGA. One of the reasons is that it has a very high resolution, of course. And another thing is that you don't need to have an extra port for your audio as well, because HDMI transfer both video and audio together, so you can easily just plug in your HDMI and you're gonna be good. So most of the computers today support HDMI. If they are not very old, they support HDMI, and also some of the TVs support HDMI as well, so you can connect your computer to your TV as well this way, and you don't need the audio port anymore. Another port that we're going to talk about is a communication port or COM port, and it is called DE9. Most of the people, or sometimes when you search, you see that they mistake DE9 with DB9, but it is actually DE9, and the reason is that E shows the size of the shell, so that means the size of this shell is E. The size B, which is they are mistaking it with DB, for example, they say DB9, the actual size of the B is this one, so this shell size called DB, but the one that we're talking about is DE. I hope I haven't confused you, but so this is DE9 because of the size of shell. It is not used as much. This is serial as well, and this communication port, it's not used maybe at all. It is used sometimes, but USB kind of replaced it, so mostly people use USB ports and the USB sticks instead of communication with DE9. And if I'm not mistaken, DE9 should be from IBM as well. USB is a stand for the Universal Serial Bus. It's true that it says universal, but there are so many different type of USB, so you can't, if you have different type of devices and you want to connect them together, you can't just go and buy a USB. You have to exactly know what is the shape of the port of your USB and find the right jack for that USB. that's one of the things that you want to look out for, because they have different shapes and different forms. But USBs are very familiar to everyone, and they're very popular. The reason is they can do so many things. They can charge, they can transfer data, you can keep information, you can store information on your USB sticks, and you can carry it around, use it for other computers. So there are lots of use for the USB, and almost all computers support USB. And you can have different devices like mouses, keyboard, and everything can be connected with the USB, which is very convenient, but you always want to look for what type of USB you're going to be using. And there is another thing that you want to watch out for, is that the speeds of the USBs differ. So we have USB 2, USB 3, and when the number goes higher, the speed of it goes higher as well. So that means USB 3 is the fastest of all, and the fastest of the USB 2 and USB 1. And I'm guessing USB 3 should be 5 times faster than USB 2. The way to find it, to find the port, and because you have to find the port that have the right specification, it is fast as well, so you will be able to transfer the data as fast as your USB stick or your USB port. So the way to look for it is that the port is either blue, or it has a sign SS, which I think is a stand for super speed beside it. So you want to look for the sign SS, or you want to look for the color blue. That means that is your fast USB. So if you're using the USB 3, or if you're using Thunderbolt, a certain type of Thunderbolt that is compatible with the port, you can use them in those ports, and the rest of your USB, which are not fast speed, maybe you can use with the regular USB ports. And after USB, we're going to talk about the Ethernet ports. Ethernet, well, normally most of the computers use Wi-Fi right now, so but sometimes you want to have a network, a small network with a few computers. You want to connect a couple of computers together, which you can just use Ethernet cables, Ethernet ports. And if I'm not, RJ45 should be the cable that goes to Ethernet port. I hope I haven't ruined the name. I do believe it's going to be RJ45 that's used for this port. If you want to do networking, or you can connect from your router to your Ethernet port, then you can connect to the internet as well. But there are a couple of things you want to keep in mind when you are getting your cable, RJ45 cable. One of the thing is the length of the cable. It has to be compatible with the speed that you have, and you have to check the speed of your device as well to see what is the specification of your Ethernet port. Because one of the thing is, if they are not compatible, if the speeds are not compatible, you will lose lots of speed. It's not just a little. You will go to the lower level. I don't know how to explain this. That means, for example, if they have different specification of the speeds, if for example one speed is 1 and the other one is 5, if you don't have, if your cable, or if the length of your cable, or the quality of your cable, or the quality of your port doesn't support speed 5, then you will go to the speed 1. So you won't go to speed 4, you will go to speed 1. So you have to be very careful about these things. Those numbers were just for example, so they are not the specification of the Ethernet cable. I have to go and search for what are the speeds, but just be mindful of that you're following the specification and the lengths as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you in next video. Bye.